The endocrine system uses hormones to cause changes around the body in order to maintain homeostasis. So what are these hormones? Hormones are chemical substances that circulate through the bloodstream, and they exert an effect on a specific target cell. So they're not going to act on just any cell, they're looking for one in particular to bind to. And so it can only exert its effect on a cell if that cell contains a receptor for that hormone. So there are two types of hormones we're going to look at: steroid hormones and protein-based hormones. So steroid hormones are made from cholesterol. So you might remember hearing about cholesterol when you were studying the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane. And so cholesterol can embed itself in the cell membrane because it is mainly hydrophobic. So this is the same for steroid hormones. They're based on cholesterol and they are hydrophobic, which means they don't like water. So some examples of steroid hormones are cortisol, progesterone, and testosterone. So because they are hydrophobic, they are insoluble in water, and so in order to get around in the blood, they have to be carried around. So they have a carrier protein that they're combined with, and that protein carries them around the blood. And they move around the blood until they find their target cells, and they can pass right through the cell membrane of those target cells because they are hydrophobic, right? So they come off of their carrier protein, they go right in through the cell membrane, and then they attach to a protein receptor molecule in the cytoplasm of the cell. When they do that, that hormone receptor complex enters the nucleus and goes in and acts as a regulator of gene transcription. So it promotes transcription of some genes, or it might inhibit certain other genes from being transcribed. And then as a result of the changes in transcription, there's a change in protein synthesis. So this diagram shows how that works. So you've got a steroid hormone that is in the blood, and it's going to go through the cell membrane, and it's going to bind to its receptor in the cytoplasm. And then it's going to go through the nuclear membrane. And then in the nucleus, it's going to bind onto the DNA at a regulatory site. And then that's going to cause mRNA to be transcribed, or in other cases, it might cause some mRNA to stop being transcribed. And then that new mRNA is going to leave the nucleus and be translated into a protein, which has an effect. So the steroid hormone coming has caused the production of a new protein, which is then going to do something. The other type of hormone are protein hormones. So they're either composed of peptides, which is a small chain of amino acids, or they're derivatives of one specific amino acid, tyrosine. So some examples of peptide hormones are insulin and antidiuretic hormone, and we're going to talk about both of those later in the unit. And an example of a tyrosine derivative is thyroxine, which is produced in the thyroid gland. So these proteins are soluble in water, so they can go around in the blood, but they can't get through the cell membrane when they find their target cell. So their target cell has a receptor on its surface. And so the steroid hormones, the receptor was inside the cell. For protein hormones, the receptor is on the cell surface. So the hormone is going to bind to that receptor on the cell surface, and then that complex is going to change shape. So that receptor is going to change shape, and that's going to trigger a chain of reactions within the cell. So different enzymes are going to be affected and their activity will change. So this diagram shows how protein hormones work. So you have the hormone, in this case they're showing growth factor, binding to its receptor on the cell membrane, and go in within the cytoplasm. This causes a change in a bunch of enzymes. So this changes shape, which might affect this enzyme, which is causing this reaction, which causes this. So it's a cascade of changes. And generally what happens is all those changes end up activating a transcription factor in the nucleus, which then affects transcription, just like the steroid hormones did. They just do it in a different manner. So those are the two types of hormones, the protein-based hormones and the steroid hormones, and their different modes of action.